Hello everyone, welcome to History at Bedtime. Tonight, we're going to step quietly into the heart of ancient Rome, where the sun gleams off marble streets, the scent of baked bread drifts through bustling marketplaces, and the roar of the Colosseum still echoes faintly in the imagination. A world where the line between heroism, spectacle, and survival was drawn in sand, and every citizen, slave, and warrior had a role to play in the drama of daily life. A gentle warning: this story may make the past feel startlingly vivid. You probably won't make it through this day without picturing the clatter of armor or the cheer of the crowd. And that's exactly the point. Let curiosity soften the edges of the present and allow yourself to drift into the lives of the men and women who fought, trained, and sometimes simply endured. Take a deep, calming breath. Let your shoulders relax. Let the day slip softly away. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. Tonight, we'll wander through the training grounds, the shadowed streets of Rome, and the colossal arenas where gladiators became legends, or perhaps mere players in a larger spectacle. We'll explore their weapons, their rituals, their struggles, and the humanity that thrived amid sand, sweat, and applause. Along the way, we'll feel the pulse of ancient Rome and the rhythm of lives lived in the bright glare of history's spotlight, carrying you gently towards sleep as these stories unfold. You walk along the cobbled streets of Rome just as dusk settles, the sun melting into the horizon like molten gold pouring over the Tiber. The city hums softly beneath your feet, the aroma of baking bread mingling with the faint tang of river water. Lanterns flicker in doorways, shadows of toga-clad citizens stretching across walls, and somewhere in the distance, a blacksmith hammers metal, ringing out a rhythm that feels almost like a heartbeat. You probably won't make it through this day without thinking, well, at least I didn't volunteer for the arena. Before we wander further, a gentle nudge. If you like stories that let history lull you to sleep, consider hitting subscribe and giving a thumbs up. It really helps keep the old Roman roads illuminated. And do me a favor, comment your location and local time. It's oddly comforting to know where in the world fellow dreamers are tuning in from. Now, let's ease back into our time travel. The Colosseum looms in the distance, not yet alive with cheers, but already whispering tales of spectacle. Built under the Flavian emperors, it could hold over 50,000 spectators. Imagine the seating chart headaches. Here, gladiators, men, and occasionally women, trained in the Lannister schools, prepared for fights that were part ritual, part entertainment, and part brutal career ladder. You hear the clink of armor from a nearby training yard and smell the sweat-soaked soaked leather of shields. These were people who transformed fear into skill. One obscure fact: some gladiators were known to wear amulets depicting phallic symbols to ward off bad luck, which probably raised a few eyebrows, even in a city as peculiar as Rome. Historians still debate whether the average Roman truly understood the training behind each blow, or just came for the spectacle. But you can feel it. The tension, the anticipation, even on quiet nights like this one. Remember the soft glow of the street lamps earlier. It's back, painting the arena's arches in warm amber. You pause by a small fountain, where water trickles steadily, reflecting the sky. Nearby, a young trainee practices his stances, arms shaking as he balances a wooden sword. The clang of metal rings faintly from a distant yard where hardened veterans spar, the sound carrying across the city like a warning drumbeat. They are not yet the heroes of legend, just men testing themselves, learning that every movement matters when life can hinge on a flick of the wrist. And then there's the subtle humor in it all. Spectators often bet on fighters as if they were arguing over chariot races, cheering and groaning with startling enthusiasm. Yet most of these so-called action heroes were slaves or prisoners. Rome's original reality shows stars. It's a strange juxtaposition. You have life and death happening in plain sight, but also the mundane chaos of Roman vendors selling bread, wine, and olives. A reminder, even in history's grand arenas, life was just life. You continue wandering, this time edging closer to the amphitheater's outer walls, where the smell of freshly churned sand and distant smoke from nearby kitchens fills the air. The Colosseum structure is awe-inspiring, columns rising like stone giants. It was completed in 80 CE under Emperor Titus, a project meant to impress and pacify the masses, the Roman version of let them eat, entertainment, and impress it did. Graffiti scribbled by ancient spectators, essentially Roman tweets, complain about seat lines and comment on the fighters' techniques. One weird little tidbit, some graffiti praises a gladiator as handsome and skilled, but lazy in the morning, which may hint at ancient snout-say button debates. You wander past a vendor selling olives and honey cakes, their sweet aroma a gentle reminder that Romans didn't live solely for blood sport. Children run past, tugging at togas, their laughter mingling with the faint sounds of training. You can almost see the duality of the gladiator life, rigorous, sometimes terrifying training in the ludus, punctuated by brief, oddly human moments like meals shared with comrades or sneaky bets placed under tables. A major historical fact floats into your mind. Gladiators were often categorized by combat style: retiari with nets and tridents, murmillos with heavy shields and helmets, and threx with curved swords, each facing particular opponents in a carefully choreographed display. Not every fight ended in death. Sometimes, mercy was shown with the emperor's thumb, or a rare pause in the chaos. Scholars still debate how often fights ended fatally versus theatrically. As you walk past a fountain again, remembering the quiet reflection from earlier, you hear the rhythmic stamping of feet on wooden floors. This is the training ground, where sweat, discipline, and occasional grumbling meet under the watchful eyes of Lannister, trainers whose voices could rival any motivational speaker today. There's a subtle irony here. Some of these trainers were ex-gladiators themselves, bitter, yet guiding the next generation of fighters, much like a coach who complains loudly about your form while secretly hoping you succeed. Nearby, a trainee balances a practice shield, pretending it weighs twice as much, muttering, "I'll show them tomorrow, maybe." The juxtaposition of intense focus and human foibles is comforting. In a way, even in the arena, people are people. You feel the sand underfoot, hear distant chatter, and even notice a small lizard scuttling near a wall, reminding you that nature quietly continues amid all human drama. And so, the day drifts gently on, warriors preparing, trainers instructing, vendors calling out, and life unfolding in small, fascinating details. You can almost sense the stories whispered by the stone and sand, tales of triumph, fleeting fame, and the odd romantic crush between fighters in corners of the ludus. Yes, history is serious, but it's also weirdly, beautifully human. The next morning, you find yourself wandering toward the outskirts of the training grounds, where the early sun casts long, lazy shadows across the wooden practice arenas. You hear the soft creak of oars from the nearby river and the occasional bark of a dog, mundane sounds layered beneath the intensity of gladiator life. You probably won't make it through this day without feeling slightly impressed and slightly terrified at the same time. You pause to watch a group of murmillos practicing their swings, shields heavy in hand. These fighters, often taken from conquered lands or born into slavery, were trained relentlessly, day after day, to make their motions fluid, almost dance-like. One fact to note: some gladiators became so popular that fans would buy miniature figurines of them, perhaps the earliest Roman action figures, and display them in homes. A truly weird cultural tidbit: some gladiators were known to have beauty regimens, bathing in scented oils and powders to appeal to the adoring public, because nothing says dangerous warrior like carefully coiffed hair. Historians still debate whether all gladiators were slaves or if some volunteered for the thrill, the glory, or simply the chance at fame. As you wander past, you notice the same trainee from before, now drenched in sweat but grinning, practicing a tricky maneuver under the watchful eye of a lanista. There's a subtle humor in seeing someone take life and death training so seriously while sneaking bites of bread when no one's looking. Nearby, a group of children giggles as they reenact small bouts with sticks, pretending the Colosseum is their arena. The echoes of these playful duels drift softly over the real fighters, a gentle reminder that even in Rome, life carries on in tiny, intimate ways. Vendors set up small tables, selling spiced bread and salted fish to trainers and watchers alike. You smell the mixture of sweat, bread, and river water, and it settles over you like a warm blanket. A major historical fact enters your mind: gladiatorial schools, or ludus, were highly organized, with strict hierarchies, diets designed to build endurance, and even medical care to maintain the investment of the lanista. Some of the wealthiest Romans sponsored gladiators, essentially creating celebrity athletes of the ancient world. The irony is palpable: death and entertainment intertwined with profit and popularity, yet life marched on, ordinary and extraordinary at once. By midday, the heat settles over the city, softening the sharp edges of stone and sand. You wander through a quieter courtyard where older veterans instruct younger fighters. The sound of clashing wood and metal mingles with murmured advice, a rhythm almost hypnotic in its regularity. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining yourself stepping onto the sand, arms raised, heart racing, The trainers are meticulous. Each swing, each pivot, each stance is observed and corrected as if they're teaching a dance rather than preparing for combat. One obscure tidbit: some gladiators trained with music playing, the rhythm of drums helping to time attacks, giving the whole process a strangely ceremonial feel. Historians still debate whether this musical accompaniment was widespread or limited to special occasions. A young rhetorarius, net and trident in hand, rehearses the slow, sweeping motions of entangling a foe. You notice the sweat glistening on his brow, the focus in his eyes. It's not just a physical challenge, it's psychological, a mental choreography that tests courage, precision, and patience. Vendors push past the edges, shouting, "Olives, fresh fish, sweet bread for the brave." The incongruity makes you smile. Life and death, side by side, ordinary and extraordinary. Fact: gladiators often lived in close quarters, sharing meals, stories, and occasionally small pranks. Another, the medical attention they received, surprisingly advanced for the time, was both to preserve life and maintain the show. You watch a Lannister bandage a young fighter's minor cut, muttering something that sounds suspiciously like "better healed than dead, kid." And as you stand, breathing in the mixture of sand, sweat, and sunlight, you realize the subtle humanity of it all. They laughed, they groaned, they strategized, and sometimes they even whispered love notes in between drills. Remember the street lamps from section 1? Well, imagine them replaced by torches as night falls, casting long shadows over the sand, transforming routine training into almost mystical rituals. As afternoon drifts lazily into evening, you find yourself strolling along the cobblestone paths that wind around the amphitheater. The sun has softened into a warm amber, casting long shadows across the sand and stone. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining the roar of thousands of spectators, each voice a small tremor shaking the ground beneath your feet. You notice the families of gladiators settling near the edges of the arena, stinchings, spouses, and occasionally a mother holding a tiny child. It's a quiet contrast to the booming shouts of the crowd, a gentle reminder that these warriors were not just performers, but people with lives outside the sand. One historical fact: some gladiators earned enough fame and prize money to purchase their freedom, transforming from enslaved fighters into celebrated citizens. Another, Roman amphitheaters were designed with such precision that even a whisper from the announcer could carry to the farthest rows, a marvel of ancient acoustics. A peculiar cultural tidbit strikes you. Wealthy spectators sometimes commissioned graffiti praising their favorite gladiators, drawing tiny caricatures with inscriptions like "Spartacus swings like the wind," creating an ancient form of fan mail. Historians still debate whether these inscriptions were mostly celebratory or occasionally used to shame the gladiators they deemed underperforming. You wander past a group of murmillos discussing techniques in hushed tones, the clinking of metal armor faint against the background hum of city life. Vendors call out one last time, offering dates, figs, and roasted nuts. their voices blending into the cadence of training and conversation. You can almost hear the faint laughter of someone recalling a joke from earlier in the day. 3 jokes per section, right, about a rhetorarius who kept tripping over his own net. Nearby, a lanista is teaching a trick with a gladius, showing how a small misstep can turn an offensive move into a vulnerable one. The young gladiators absorb it with a mix of awe and nervous anticipation, and as you pause to watch, you realize how intricate and ritualized these combats were. Each swing a careful balance between skill, showmanship, and survival. Night begins to settle like a soft cloak over the city. Torches flicker along the walls of the ludus, casting golden glows over weathered faces and gleaming metal. You probably won't make it through this day without feeling the strange mix of serenity and tension that permeates a place built for spectacle and danger. In a quieter corner, you watch older gladiators unwind, stretching and tending to minor injuries with practiced hands. It's almost a domestic scene. Conversations about meals, family, and distant hometowns floating in the night air. Fact, some gladiators became tutors and coaches after retiring from the arena, passing on their knowledge to a new generation, blending mentorship with legend. A few particularly skilled gladiators were occasionally consulted by military generals for combat techniques, an unusual crossover of sport and strategy. A weird tidbit: some gladiators reportedly kept small personal charms or amulets tucked under their tunics, believed to bring luck in the arena. Historians still debate how widespread these charms were, and whether they were superstitious or sentimental. You stroll past the training dummies, noting faint marks of countless swings, each telling a story of determination, frustration, or triumph. You hear faint laughter, perhaps at a jest someone made about a lanista who once forgot which hand held the sword during practice. Slightly ironic, but charming, vendors pack up for the night, the scents of roasted meats and baked bread lingering like a gentle memory. And as you step outside the walls of the ludus, the city's hum feels both distant and intimate. You can imagine the Colosseum under moonlight, empty but resonant, waiting for the next day when the sand will once again host stories of courage, missteps, and human drama. Even the stars seem to pause, twinkling faintly above the rooftops, as if listening along with you to the quiet tales of Rome's first action heroes. The next morning, you rise with a gentle fog hanging over the city, softening the sharp edges of rooftops and walls. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining the thud of leather boots and the metallic ring of swords in the cool, misty air. As you wander along the main street toward the training arena, the aroma of baking bread mixes with the faint tang of the river. It's ordinary, yet underlying it all is the pulse of Rome's relentless energy. Inside the ludus, you find a group of gladiators practicing their footwork. Every pivot and sidestep is precise, almost hypnotic, and yet the occasional stumble reminds you of their human fragility. One fact: gladiators were often segregated by fighting style. Retiarii with nets and tridents, Murmillos with heavy shields and swords, each school perfecting its own methods. Some gladiators participated in mock battles for spectators, creating intricate spectacles that resembled choreographed theatre. more than raw combat. It wasn't uncommon for gladiators to be given nicknames by fans, sometimes humorous, sometimes ironic, like the Gentle Lion or Fumblefoot. Historians still debate how much these names influence their actual personas or fighting styles. You notice a young murmillo practicing a swing while humming an odd little tune, perhaps a way to keep rhythm or simply to amuse himself during long, repetitive drills. As you wander past, you catch snippets of conversations about past bouts, training mishaps, and subtle bets placed quietly among trainers. The air is filled with the soft scrape of sandals, the faint clang of practiced swords, and the occasional laugh. Vendors set up small stands with dried fruit and salted fish. The smells a comforting backdrop to the structured chaos of training. It's easy to forget, as you watch, that these warriors live under strict rules, their freedom often limited, yet they carry a sense of pride and camaraderie that feels timeless. You recall the street you passed earlier with the street lamps from section 1. Same city, same shadows, different day, but the energy hums through it all. By midday, the sun has climbed higher, bathing the arena in a warm, golden light. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining yourself standing on the sand, the crowd's imaginary roar echoing in your mind, your pulse quickened by anticipation. The clang of practiced swords resonates like music, a rhythm of discipline and survival. A retiarius adjusts his net, tossing it lazily as he moves, testing the weight and swing. Fact, the retiarius relied more on agility and cunning than brute strength, a sharp contrast to the heavily armored murmillos. Another, during some larger games, gladiators would fight in pairs or teams, sometimes in elaborate narratives depicting mythological battles, adding a theatrical element that few modern arenas match. One quirky tidbit: some gladiators were rumored to carry lucky charms sewn into their clothing, tiny tokens to guide the favor of the gods, or perhaps just a comforting reminder of home. Historians still debate whether these charms were purely superstition or sometimes a psychological aid to steady nerves in combat. You meander past a lanista, giving feedback, his voice firm but fair. A young gladiator tries to mimic a veteran's move, tripping slightly, earning a soft chuckle and a patient correction. Life in the ludus is rigorous, but moments of levity keep the spirit alive, reminding you that even amidst life and death practice, humans find space for humor. The scents of bread, oil, and polished metal fill the air. You watch as a few spectators, families, merchants, and curious travelers pause at the edges of the training ground, observing quietly. The contrast between their relaxed leisure and the gladiators' intense preparation creates a soft, hypnotic tension, a rhythm you can almost feel with each inhale. As the day stretches lazily onward, you notice again the enduring humanity of this world, discipline, ambition, humor, and a strange, quiet artistry, all mingling on the sun-warmed sand. Afternoon settles into a golden haze, the city streets glowing under the gentle warmth of the sun. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining the subtle tension in the air, the faint metallic scent of sand brushed with sweat and polished bronze. You stroll toward the amphitheater, where the distant murmur of workers and spectators blends into a calming rhythm, like the slow tide of history itself. Inside the arena, a pair of gladiators practice a simulated duel. Each movement is deliberate, almost poetic. Fact, some gladiators trained for years in specialized schools, perfecting not just combat skills, but also performance techniques to keep the crowd entertained. Another fact, contrary to popular belief, gladiatorial combat did not always end in death. The editor, the person in charge, could grant mercy if the fighter had shown skill and courage. A peculiar tidbit, some gladiators were known to secretly communicate with the audience, winking or gesturing to earn favor, and sometimes free meals from wealthy patrons. Historians still debate how intentional or organized these interactions truly were. You notice a Mamillo adjusting his helmet, a small smirk playing at the corners of his lips, as if he knows something you don't, reminding you that behind the masks, these are living, breathing humans. The sounds of distant bells, footsteps on stone, and faint laughter mingle as the afternoon drifts lazily by. A vendor carrying a tray of spiced nuts pauses, letting you inhale the warm scent of cinnamon and honey. A sensory bridge to the streets beyond the arena. You notice the way shadows fall across the sand, dancing with the movements of practice, echoing the choreography of countless battles before this day. And as you watch, you feel a strange sense of quiet awe, the meticulous rhythm of training, the subtle camaraderie among fighters, and the understated artistry of an ancient culture that prized both entertainment and discipline. It's almost like time slows here, allowing you to savor the ordinary and extraordinary moments, mingling seamlessly. By late afternoon, the arena takes on a softer honeyed light. You probably won't make it through this day without noticing the gentle interplay of shadows and sunlight across the sand, highlighting every swing, stumble, and calculated step. You wander along the edge of the training ground, letting your eyes drift over the dancers of bronze and leather, their bodies a testament to discipline, endurance, and artistry. Retiarius practices his thrusts with an almost meditative focus. Fact, the net-wielding gladiators relied heavily on agility and psychological tactics, often trying to intimidate or confuse their opponents before the actual strike. Another fact, the crowd's reactions were more than entertainment. They were a subtle guide for gladiators, shaping the style and flow of the performance. A quirky cultural tidbit, some gladiators would decorate their helmets with small, whimsical motifs, birds, stars, or tiny animals, perhaps as a personal signature or charm. Historians still debate whether these were purely decorative or served a symbolic protective purpose. You notice one young gladiator tracing a faint design into his shield, his tongue sticking slightly out of concentration. A small human moment amidst grand preparation. As you wander through the warm, sunlit arena, the mingled sounds of practice swords, gentle laughter, and distant city life blend into a soothing symphony. You recall the streets, the vendors, and the lanista's firm voice from earlier sections, noticing again how each element ties seamlessly into this living tapestry. Even in the intensity of preparation, life in the ludus flows with a rhythm both meticulous and surprisingly gentle. And as you step back to watch this scene in its entirety, you sense the subtle beauty of discipline, endurance, and human ingenuity. It's not just combat, it's performance, camaraderie, and quiet artistry, layered into a living moment suspended between history and imagination. A quiet chuckle escapes you at a minor stumble, reminding you that even Rome's first action heroes were, at heart, human. Evening creeps over the city, and the streets take on a soft amber glow, their cobblestones slick with the memory of passing carts and hurried footsteps. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining the fading sunlight glinting off bronze helmets and polished shields, casting long, dancing shadows across the arena's sand. The air smells faintly of roasting meats from nearby taverns, mingling with the earthy tang of the amphitheater itself. Inside, gladiators begin winding down, stretching limbs that have been pushed to their limits. Fact, some gladiators were prized for their stamina, training hours longer than a modern athlete's day, often under grueling conditions meant to condition both body and mind. Another fact, medical attention for gladiators was surprisingly advanced for the era, with rudimentary surgical techniques and bandaging practices designed to keep fighters alive for future bouts, because dead gladiators weren't good for ticket sales. A quirky tidbit: gladiators sometimes wore jewelry or charms, little iron or bronze trinkets, tucked into belts or armor for luck, though they were usually subtle enough to go unnoticed by casual observers. Historians still debate whether these were mostly symbolic or had practical uses, like marking rank or school affiliation. You notice a murmillo carefully polishing the metal edge of his shield, perhaps thinking about the day's training, or perhaps imagining the cheers of a future crowd. From the rafters, the faint laughter of children and whispers of street vendors filter in, a soft reminder that life continues outside the sand-strewn arena. The day has begun to slow, the clanging of practiced swords giving way to quieter discussions about technique, nutrition, and future bouts. You pause, absorbing the gentle rhythm, feeling a sense of calm as the day fades, a rare, quiet window into a world usually brimming with adrenaline and spectacle. The camaraderie among the gladiators is subtle yet palpable. A hand claps a shoulder, a knowing glance passes between two trainees, and you realize that these moments of human connection, almost invisible to the audience, are just as vital as the dramatic duels themselves. The sun dips lower, shadows stretch, and the city around the arena seems to exhale, settling into a slower pace that invites reflection and rest. Night approaches, wrapping the city in a velvet blanket, pierced only by the warm glow of oil lamps. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining the flicker of torchlight across the sand, highlighting the gleam of helmets and the quiet determination etched on each gladiator's face. The city hums faintly in the background, a soft counterpoint to the fading echoes of practice. A young retiarius folds his net carefully, inspecting each knot. Fact, nets were surprisingly heavy and required considerable skill to wield effectively. An ill-timed throw could leave the gladiator dangerously exposed. Another fact, some amphitheaters featured retractable awnings called velaria, designed to shade spectators, a clever precursor to modern stadium canopies. A cultural tidbit, gladiators occasionally perform mock celebrity appearances in public squares to boost their fame, allowing fans to see their heroes outside the arena, signing small tokens or performing stunts. Historians still debate how widespread or common these public appearances were. You notice a Mamillo quietly practicing a flourish with his sword, a small smile tugging at his lips as he imagines the cheers of an absent audience. The smell of cooling stone, roasted foods, and distant sea air mingle, grounding you in the present, even as your mind drifts through the echoes of ancient Rome. The gentle cadence of movement, the soft scraping of sandals, and the occasional whisper create a lullaby of daily life, a rhythm designed to soothe rather than startle. You walk slowly to the edge of the arena, watching shadows stretch and merge, feeling a rare intimacy with a world so often imagined only in violence and spectacle. Even amidst preparation and discipline, there is humor, artistry, and a quiet humanity that persists, as persistent as the stars emerging overhead. You might chuckle softly at a minor stumble or a clumsy flourish, realizing that even history's first action heroes were charmingly, undeniably human. The city settles into night, a gentle hush falling across rooftops, streets, and the arena, inviting you to linger in the soft afterglow, to breathe deeply, and to carry these quiet observations into your own dreams. The city's night deepens, but the amphitheater remains alive with quiet activity, a space suspended between the clamor of the day and the soft embrace of evening. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining the delicate contrast of shadow and torchlight, where every polished helmet glimmers like a small star fallen to the sand. The scent of damp stone and distant bonfires lingers in the air, almost like a lullaby for the city itself. A secutor practices careful footwork near the edge of the arena. Fact, secutaries were designed to counter-retiari, their heavy armor and rounded helmets creating a slow, deliberate presence meant to protect them from entangling nets. Another fact, despite their intimidating appearance, secutaries relied heavily on agility and anticipation, proving that even the tank of the arena had its subtleties. A quirky tidbit. Some gladiators kept small personal journals or graffiti in their dormitories, scribbling favorite techniques, victories, or even poems. Small windows into the inner lives of these warriors. Historians still debate how widespread literacy actually was among gladiators, though evidence suggests it was more common than previously thought. You notice a Mamillo tracing lines in the sand with a sword tip, perhaps composing a secret message or a tiny, silent celebration of the day's achievements. Outside the arena, the streets echo softly with the steps of late wanderers, the occasional laughter of a tavern patron, and the rustle of wind through distant trees. Inside, the clinking of equipment, gentle stretches, and whispered strategies form a private symphony. You feel a subtle kinship with the gladiators, as if the boundary between spectator and participant softens with each passing moment. The camaraderie and small rituals of daily life emerge in unexpected ways. A shared glance over a shield, a silent nod to a particularly graceful flourish, or the soft murmur of encouragement. The city hums around you, and you feel the rhythm of Rome itself, a city of endurance, artistry, and surprisingly gentle moments beneath the surface of spectacle. The stars begin to pierce the darkening sky, tiny pinpricks of light reflected faintly on polished metal and sand-strewn surfaces. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining the hush of anticipation, the delicate interplay of torchlight and shadow painting, fleeting masterpieces across the arena. A gentle breeze carries the scent of roasted meats and salted sea air, mingling with the faint aroma of oil lamps and human sweat. Aretiarius adjusts the knots of his net with quiet precision. Fact, nets were more than weapons. They were an extension of the fighter, requiring constant attention and skill to wield effectively without self-injury. Another fact, amphitheaters often featured sophisticated water drainage systems, ensuring that sudden storms wouldn't turn the arena into a dangerous quagmire. A whimsical cultural tidbit, some gladiators would decorate their sandals with tiny charms or engravings, believing these small tokens brought luck in combat or protection from unseen forces. Historians still debate whether these charms were genuinely spiritual or simply a playful custom. You notice a Mamillo tapping the edge of his helmet rhythmically, perhaps keeping time with his thoughts. A subtle human echo in the arena's otherwise disciplined environment. The sounds of night, the occasional distant call of an animal, the soft footsteps of a guard, the whisper of wind through the arches, blend with the quiet movements of gladiators, preparing for rest or reflection. You wander along the outer edge, taking in the carefully curated chaos, weapons neatly stacked, armor glinting faintly, and the soft, unspoken stories etched into each surface. In these moments, even the most disciplined fighters reveal their humanity. Minor slips, small acts of humor, fleeting expressions of exhaustion and triumph. You smile softly at a brief, unintentional stumble, realizing that every moment here is layered with history, personality, and the subtle art of survival. The arena, the city, and the night itself seem to exhale together, inviting you to linger, to breathe slowly, and to drift gently into reflection. The city sleeps uneasily under a canopy of stars. The distant hum of the Tiber River, a soft lullaby that threads through the streets. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining the cool stone beneath your feet and the faint scent of olive oil from nearby homes. The amphitheater stands as a quiet sentinel, its arches casting long, protective shadows over the sand below. Inside, the morning rituals of gladiators begin even before dawn. Fact, gladiators trained intensely, often waking at the first light to practice combat techniques, wrestling, and endurance drills, their days as regimented as modern military schedules. Another fact, some gladiators were celebrities in their own time, their likenesses etched into coins, frescoes, or even mosaics, public admiration that bordered on obsession. A weird cultural tidbit. Some gladiators reportedly slept with one eye open, not only to avoid surprise attacks from rivals, but also in the hope that their dreams might reveal tips for strategy or victory. Historians still debate whether this was widespread practice or mostly anecdotal exaggeration. You notice a young Thrax adjusting his small curved sword, glancing at the arena's edge with the wary optimism of someone accustomed to danger yet craving acclaim. The city slowly awakens outside. Street vendors ready their carts, the smell of freshly baked bread wafting through narrow alleys. Inside, the clatter of swords, the scrape of sandals, and the soft murmur of trainers create a rhythm both energizing and oddly calming. There is a poetry in the repetition, a quiet meditation in every swing, thrust, and parry. Even as the day begins in earnest, moments of humanity peek through, a shared smile over a minor stumble, whispered advice between teammates, or the private celebration of mastering a particularly tricky maneuver. You wander past the training pits, the sand shifting underfoot, and feel a faint kinship with these fighters, each one a fragile, focused echo of human persistence. Sunlight spills into the arena, warming the cool stone and illuminating glimmers of metal across armor and helmets. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining the gleam of swords catching the morning light and the faint dust rising with each measured step. The air is a mixture of sweat and of the faint fragrance of herbs used for minor ailments and recovery. A secutor flexes, adjusting his thick helmet straps. Fact, secutores. Heavy armor made them slower but more durable, creating a fascinating dynamic where speed met resilience in the arena. Another fact, amphitheaters could hold tens of thousands of spectators, with some events so popular the tickets were sold in advance and seating carefully assigned according to social rank. An obscure tidbit, some gladiators tattooed themselves with small symbols or marks that recorded victories, injuries, or personal mantras, an ancient form of warrior journaling. Historians still debate the precise meanings or consistency of these tattoos across regions and schools. You notice a Murmillo practicing a controlled flourish with his sword, the tip slicing the morning light like a brushstroke across sand. Outside, the city hums with life, merchants calling, children laughing, and the soft clatter of carts over uneven streets. Inside, the arena is a carefully orchestrated world, each movement measured, each strike deliberate, and each pause heavy with potential. There is a rhythm here, a subtle cadence that suggests not just training, but mindfulness, a prelude to both performance and reflection. As you wander closer to the edge of the sand, you glimpse fleeting moments of camaraderie, a whispered joke, a pat on the shoulder, or the careful adjustment of a comrade's armor. Even in this world designed for spectacle and survival, moments of tenderness and humor emerge, softening the edges of an otherwise harsh existence. The arena, the city, and the day itself seem to breathe together, inviting you to linger in this gentle immersion, absorbing every flicker of movement, every sigh, and every faint echo of history. The sun begins its slow descent, casting amber light across the city and turning the amphitheater into a golden sanctuary of shadows. You probably won't make it through this day without noticing the soft, warm hue dancing across the sand, the faint glint of helmets, and the occasional feather caught in the breeze. The arena seems almost alive in this gentle light, as though it remembers the echoes of thousands of matches past. Aretarius stretches his net with careful precision. Fact, the Rhetorarius relied on finesse, speed, and strategy more than brute strength, using his trident to keep distance while anticipating the secutor's approach. Another fact, some gladiators could earn freedom through a remarkable string of victories, receiving the wooden sword called a rudis as a symbol of their release, a bittersweet triumph after years of training. A weird cultural tidbit, spectators sometimes brought live animals into the arena for amusement or challenge, from chickens to small dogs, which gladiators had to navigate or avoid during mock hunts. Historians still debate how much these animal encounters were actual combat practice versus mere spectacle. You notice a Murmillo quietly polishing his sword, perhaps thinking of the meals he might enjoy later. A small human indulgence amid disciplined rigor. Outside, the city carries its evening rhythm, distant bells, the murmur of conversations, and the occasional bark of a dog wandering through narrow alleys. Inside the arena, the soundscape is more intimate. Soft footfalls on sand, the clink of metal, and whispers exchanged between gladiators planning their next move. You feel the heartbeat of the amphitheater, steady, predictable, and oddly comforting. Even in this disciplined world, small gestures of humanity shine through. A laugh shared after a stumble, the discreet adjustment of armor by a fellow fighter, or the silent acknowledgement of someone's skill. These moments, delicate and fleeting, remind you that behind every mask and helmet is a person navigating life with courage, skill, and occasional mischief. Night falls slowly, and the amphitheater, now quiet, seems to exhale in relief. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining the subtle glow of torches reflecting off sand, the soft rustle of leather, and the distant hum of the city beyond the arena walls. There's a serene magic in these moments, a pause that feels like the world is holding its breath. A secutor rolls his shoulders and loosens the straps of his armor. Fact, the training regimen of gladiators was rigorous, often supervised by experienced trainers who demanded perfection in technique and discipline. Another fact, some wealthy Romans sponsored gladiators, investing in their careers as a form of entertainment and prestige, similar to modern sports teams and star athletes. A quirky cultural tidbit, gladiators sometimes wore charms or amulets made from bones or shells for luck, with designs believed to influence their performance or protect them from harm. Historians still debate the spiritual versus superstitious nature of these charms, leaving much to interpretation. You notice a rhetorarius carefully folding his net, the quiet act almost meditative, as if preparing his mind as much as his weapon for the challenges ahead. The city outside softens under moonlight. Rooftops glint faintly, shadows stretch long and thin, and the occasional lantern glows from a distant window. Inside, The arena's silence is punctuated only by minor creaks of wooden stands, the sigh of wind through the arches, and the soft shuffle of resting gladiators. You feel a slow, calming rhythm here, a world balanced between exertion and respite. Small, intimate details bring the day to a close. A murmillo brushing sand off his sandals, a whispered story shared between companions, or the soft adjustment of a trainer's cloak. The arena, now dormant, seems less a place of combat than a stage for human endurance. Camaraderie and fleeting grace. As you walk along the empty stands, you can almost hear the echoes of laughter, strategy, and quiet reflection carrying you gently toward rest. The following morning arrives with a soft haze over the city, the kind of light that drapes everything in a sleepy golden tint. You probably won't make it through this day without noticing the quiet resilience of the streets, the faint scent of herbs and bread mingling, and the gentle creak of gates opening to allow morning vendors. The amphitheater looms ahead, familiar and comforting, ready to resume its centuries-old rhythm. A murmillo tightens his greaves, watching the sun glint across the arena's arches. Fact, gladiators were often divided into classes, each with specific weapons and armor, which made each match a delicate balance of strategy and spectacle. Another fact, some gladiatorial schools operated almost like academies, offering intensive training, nutrition, and even rudimentary medical care, creating a surprisingly structured lifestyle. During certain festivals, crowds would decorate the arena with garlands and paint, turning the combat space into a temporary garden or stage, a celebration of skill as much as might. Historians still debate how widespread these decorative practices truly were, but they add a curious flourish to the mental image. You notice a retiarius practicing wrist work, the flick of his trident almost like a dance, blending elegance with lethal intent. Outside, the city hums with life, merchants shouting prices, children chasing one another, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Inside the arena, the sounds are subtler but just as alive, the shuffle of sand, soft grunts of effort, and whispered encouragement between fighters. You feel enveloped in a quiet rhythm, the pulse of the ancient world steady, guiding, and oddly comforting. Small, human moments persist, a trainer nudging a trainee with gentle humor, a gladiator wiping sweat from his brow with a hint of a smile, or the subtle camaraderie of shared knowledge and experience. Every element, from the sunlit sand to the soft shuffle of leather and metal, creates a serene, immersive world where history is tangible, alive, and at once soothing. As evening approaches, the arena settles into a deep calm. You probably won't make it through this day without imagining the cool shadows stretching across the sand, the faint glimmer of the sun's last rays on bronze armor, and the soft sigh of wind through arches. It's a quiet moment of reflection, a gentle pause that invites your mind to drift slowly with the rhythm of the world around you. A secutor rests against the wall, helmet off, revealing the thoughtful face beneath. Fact, many gladiators survived long careers through discipline, cunning, and occasional luck, earning both fame and practical rewards despite the dangers. Another fact, gladiatorial games were part of a complex social and political fabric where emperors and magistrates used spectacles to display wealth, power, and control over the masses. Some gladiators wrote short poems or messages to loved ones before matches, inscribing hope, longing, or humor on small pieces of parchment. Tiny glimpses of inner life behind the mask of the arena. Historians still debate how common this practice was, leaving room for speculation and imagination. You notice the subtle interplay of shadow and light on the sand. Every curve of the arena whispering stories of past struggles and victories. Outside, the city's rhythm slows, distant bells echo, torches flicker, and rooftops shimmer with the last light. Inside, the soft shuffle of tired feet, gentle whispers, and the occasional metallic clink form a lullaby. You feel the gentle pulse of the arena settle into you, a cadence of human endurance, bravery, and fleeting grace. As you walk the empty stands, every detail stretches out like a whispered memory. The smooth arches, the quiet sand, the faint scent of olive oil and herbs, the delicate laughter, and the muted clink of armor. Let your mind drift over this slow tapestry. The ancient city under a golden sky, gladiators resting, trains watching, and the soft lull of human history itself. Breathe in the calm and exhale slowly, letting the world of the arena dissolve gently into shadow and starlight. You feel the pulse of time slow, carrying you toward rest, carrying you softly into dreams, where every sword, every cheer, and every whisper becomes a soothing echo in the vast, eternal story of Rome. Now, as night blankets the city in quiet blue and silver, imagine the streets emptied of bustle, the gentle hum of distant water flowing through the Tiber, and the soft, lingering scent of herbs, bread, and sun-warmed stone. The amphitheater stands in silent majesty, every arch and every curve echoing the countless footsteps, whispers, and laughter that once filled its sands. Shadows stretch long and gentle across the arena, the sun's warmth giving way to the calm coolness of evening, inviting your mind to wander slowly through time. Gladiators rest in the quiet corners of the sand, their armor carefully laid aside, their swords catching faint moonlight. Trainers move softly between them, murmuring gentle advice or sharing small, quiet laughter, a reminder that even in the most disciplined lives, moments of humanity shine through. Outside, the city sleeps. Rooftops glimmer faintly, lanterns glow dimly, and distant bells echo a soothing rhythm, a lullaby woven across streets, markets, and homes. Your senses relax with every step you imagine taking through the empty stands, across the soft sand, past arches that have witnessed centuries of courage and celebration. Every detail, the soft clink of metal, the sigh of the wind, the muted footsteps, forms a gentle cadence, a heartbeat that slows with your own. Let the warmth of memory, the hum of human endeavor, and the subtle poetry of history envelop you, carrying your mind over sand, stone, and sky, gently, slowly, toward rest. Tonight, Rome breathes with you, the arena sleeps, the city dreams, and you drift on the soft, eternal pulse of human stories, carrying with it every lesson, every cheer, and every whisper from the past, until your own world quiets and your thoughts settle into the calm, timeless rhythm of night